Have you ever been caught off guard by an insult? So sharp it left you frozen with no words to defend yourself? Imagine someone looking you in the eye, calling you stupid or naive, and in that moment your confidence crumbles. What would you say back? Here's the truth. How you respond to attacks on your intelligence doesn't just protect your pride, it reveals your true strength of mind. Someone insults your intelligence. They call you stupid, naive, or imply that you can't grasp something obvious. Instantly, your confidence takes a hit. You're left speechless, wishing you had the perfect response instead of standing there, feeling smaller than you really are. We've all been there, and the truth is, most people don't handle it well. Some remain silent, then beat themselves up later for not standing their ground. Others lash out defensively, letting emotions take control, which only makes them appear less intelligent. Either way, the insulter gets exactly what they wanted, proof that their words landed, proof that they managed to shake you. But there's another path. A third option. Clever, calm, and powerful responses that not only defend your intelligence but also preserve your dignity. These aren't petty comebacks meant to wound. They're intelligent replies that reveal the very sharpness being attacked, while also exposing the weakness behind the insult. Because here's the reality. People who go around mocking others' intelligence are rarely revealing truth. Instead, they're exposing their own insecurities, their own fears of inadequacy, their desperate need to feel superior by tearing others down. Marcus Aurelius, a Stoic emperor who faced endless intellectual attacks from political rivals, never wasted energy on emotional outbursts. Instead, he answered with wisdom and composure. As he wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." The Stoics understood something vital. Your reaction to an attack says more about your character than the attack itself ever could. That's why today, I'm sharing with you 5 clever responses to use when someone insults your intelligence. Each one is designed to protect your dignity, display your wisdom, and completely shut down intellectual arrogance. And wait until you hear the third response. It's especially powerful because it flips their attack into undeniable proof of your superior analytical mind. Master these, and you'll never be left speechless again when someone tries to belittle your intelligence. So let's get started. Response number 1. I'd love to hear your perspective on this. This single sentence flips the script and forces the insulter to actually prove their supposed intelligence. Most of the time, when someone mocks your intelligence, they're only posturing. They want to look smarter, not actually demonstrate it. By inviting them to explain, you expose whether they truly know anything at all. I once witnessed this unfold in a marketing meeting. A colleague attacked Sarah's campaign proposal with a sneer. "You clearly don't understand how our target demographic thinks." His tone was dismissive. His eye roll dramatic enough for the entire room to notice. But Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't rush to defend herself or argue her competence. Instead, she smiled calmly and said, "I'd love to hear your perspective on this. What am I missing about how they think?" The room went quiet. Suddenly, the burden shifted. Her colleague now had to either deliver real insights or reveal that his insult had been nothing but empty arrogance. You saw how Sarah used a simple question to flip the situation around, forcing her colleague to actually prove the knowledge he claimed to have. He stumbled, mumbling vague generalizations about millennials wanting authenticity, but offered no real data. No concrete examples, nothing of substance. Sarah, on the other hand, stayed calm and professional. She listened with thoughtful attention and then began asking follow-up questions that quickly revealed how shallow his understanding truly was. By the end of their exchange, it was obvious to everyone in the room who actually understood marketing, and who was just throwing buzzwords into the air to cover their own ignorance. Sarah appeared curious, composed, and genuinely intelligent. Her colleague, by contrast, looked like someone who attacked others to hide the gaps in his own knowledge. This was exactly the method Socrates often used in ancient Athens. He didn't need to insult anyone. He simply asked questions that exposed the lack of knowledge in others, while always preserving his own dignity. The Stoics understood the same truth. Real intelligence is shown through curiosity and the willingness to learn, not through arrogance or condescension. And that's why this kind of response holds such psychological power. It forces the insulter into one of two corners. Either they must provide valuable insights that actually teach you something, or they reveal their insult was baseless and that they never had the superior knowledge they claimed. Either way, you win, while maintaining grace and professionalism. This response also shows deep intellectual confidence. Only someone secure in their own intelligence can respond with curiosity instead of defensiveness. It demonstrates that you care more about seeking truth than protecting your ego, and that at its core is genuine wisdom. The secret, however, lies in your tone. Say it with real curiosity, not sarcasm, not passive aggression. Your voice should carry the sincerity that you truly want to understand their perspective and learn from their expertise. That authenticity makes their original insult look petty, childish, and unprofessional in comparison. Marcus Aurelius himself wrote about seeking wisdom from every source, even from difficult or unpleasant people. And this response embodies that principle, treating every interaction as a potential learning opportunity, all while guarding your dignity. Use this response consistently, and people quickly learn something important. Insulting your intelligence won't trigger an emotional reaction. Instead, it will put them on the spot, forcing them to demonstrate their own knowledge. And here's the truth. Most people who resort to intellectual insults can't handle that kind of pressure. Their attacks come from insecurity, not superiority. This flips the entire situation. You go from being a target of their insult to the one conducting an impromptu intelligence test. And more often than not, they fail that test spectacularly. If you've ever used this response or something like it to turn an intellectual insult into a moment of learning while also exposing the attacker's lack of knowledge, drop a comment below. You might inspire others who want to handle condescension with the same confidence and calm strength. Asking for their perspective shows confidence and intellectual security. But now, let's move to our second response, one that demonstrates your analytical thinking by asking them to explain their reasoning. Response number 2. Help me understand your reasoning behind that. This simple phrase forces the insulter to unpack their criticism, while positioning you as someone who thinks analytically and systematically. People who insult intelligence rarely have any logical foundation for their words. Most of the time, they're speaking from emotion, insecurity, or the urge to feel superior. By asking them to explain their reasoning, you expose the weakness in their position, while showing that you operate from logic rather than impulse. Mike experienced this firsthand during a tense project meeting when his boss dismissed his cost-saving proposal with nothing but condescension. Saw how asking for reasoning can turn an insult into an opportunity for truth. And in another moment, Mike demonstrated just how powerful this response can be in the workplace. During a tense project meeting, his boss cut him down in front of the entire team. That's a really dumb idea. Mike, you clearly don't understand how budgets work in this industry. The room froze. Silence fell as everyone turned to Mike, waiting to see his reaction. Would he get defensive? Would he lash out? Or would he swallow the humiliation in silence? Mike did none of those things. Instead, he remained calm, collected, and professional. He looked directly at his boss and said, "Help me understand your reasoning behind that assessment. What specific aspects of the budget am I not considering?" His tone was even, genuinely inquisitive, not defensive, not sarcastic, not challenging. Suddenly, the tables turned. His boss was now in the uncomfortable position of having to either provide logical, constructive criticism that could actually help Mike refine his proposal, or reveal that his harsh dismissal had no substance behind it. Pressed for details, the boss could only muster vague remarks about industry standards and the way things are usually done, but he failed to provide any concrete reasoning. Mike didn't stop there. He leaned in with thoughtful follow-up questions. Which industry standards specifically? And could you explain how those standards apply to our current situation? With every question, the truth became harder to hide. It was clear that the proposal had not been analyzed at all. The rejection wasn't logical, it was emotional, disguised as an intellectual critique. This is precisely what the Stoics, and Marcus Aurelius himself, valued so deeply: logical thinking over impulsive emotional reactions. As emperor, Marcus constantly reminded himself that wisdom lies in reasoning, not in anger. And Mike's response is a living example of that principle. Choosing to seek clarity and understanding rather than being dragged into petty conflict or defensive arguments. The psychological power of this approach is immense. Most so-called intellectual insults are nothing more than emotional outbursts dressed up as rational assessments. When you calmly ask, "Prove to me that your judgment is based on logic, not emotion," you flip the dynamic completely. In a professional environment, this immediately elevates your presence. You are no longer someone scrambling to protect your ego. You are someone focused on problem-solving, understanding, and improvement. You come across as competent, mature, and genuinely invested in making things better. And here's the beauty of it. If they can provide logical reasoning, you've gained valuable insight and turned their critique into constructive feedback. But if they can't, you've exposed the emptiness of their attack, all while keeping your professionalism intact. Seneca often taught the importance of examining our judgments and ensuring they are guided by reason, not driven by raw emotion. By using this response, you prove that you live by those principles, while also revealing whether the other person does. The delivery, however, is crucial. Keep your tone steady, curious, and sincere. This isn't an interrogation, and it's not about embarrassing them. It's about understanding their perspective and their reasoning. That sincerity makes your intellectual maturity shine, while highlighting their lack of logical foundation. Once people realize that insulting your intelligence only results in them having to defend their reasoning publicly, they learn quickly. Either provide constructive feedback or keep the condescension to themselves. If you've ever responded to an insult by calmly asking for logical reasoning, and then watch the attacker struggle to provide any substance, share it in the comments. Your story could inspire others to see the power of analytical thinking over emotional reactions. We saw how asking someone to explain their reasoning can expose the truth behind an intellectual insult. But the third response goes even further. It doesn't just request logic, it transforms the very attack into evidence of your superior critical thinking. Response number 3. That's an interesting assumption. What led you to that conclusion? This response is especially powerful because it flips the insult into clear proof of your intelligence and analytical ability. Most intellectual insults are built on shaky assumptions rather than actual evidence. By pointing this out and asking them to explain their thought process, you're not only showcasing your critical thinking, you're also exposing the weakness of their logic. David discovered just how devastating this response could be during a dinner party conversation about economic policy. He shared his perspective on inflation, and almost immediately another guest dismissed him with a sharp remark. "You obviously don't know much about economics if you think that." It wasn't an invitation to discuss. It was designed to shut David down and position the speaker as the expert in the room. But instead of defending his credentials or getting flustered, David calmly replied, That's an interesting assumption about my knowledge level. What led you to that conclusion? His tone was calm, curious, and thoughtful. He sounded more like he was analyzing the other person's reasoning process than trying to protect himself from an attack. The question hung in the air, and suddenly the atmosphere shifted. The attacker couldn't point to anything specific David had said that justified such a sweeping judgment. His insult had been a snap decision based on disagreement, not evidence. Now he was forced to either admit that or attempt a shaky backtrack while the entire group watched. When pressed, all he could manage was, "Well, your point about inflation just seemed simplistic." David followed up immediately. "Which specific aspect seemed simplistic to you? I'd really like to understand how you analyzed my reasoning." Each carefully phrased question made it more obvious that the insult had no substance. Epictetus taught the importance of examining our assumptions and judgments before accepting them as truth. This response embodies that wisdom perfectly. At the same time, it reveals that the insulter hasn't done the same intellectual work. In effect, you're running a live analysis of their reasoning process, and that instantly positions you as the more thoughtful, rational person in the exchange. The psychological reversal here is brilliant. You're no longer the target of their attack. Instead, you've become the one evaluating the quality of their thought process. The dynamic shifts from you being on the defensive to you holding the intellectual authority in the conversation. What makes this response even more powerful is that it demonstrates several forms of intelligence all at once. You show critical thinking by questioning assumptions, emotional intelligence by staying calm under attack, and social intelligence by redirecting the conversation in a constructive way. In short, you're proving exactly the kind of analytical thinking that makes their insult look misguided and hollow. Marcus Aurelius regularly examined his own assumptions and encouraged others to do the same. This response shows that you live by the same Stoic principle. You don't blindly accept judgments without evidence, even when those judgments are aimed at you. The key, however, lies in delivery. You must maintain genuine curiosity, no sarcasm, no hostility. Your sincerity makes it clear that you truly want to understand how they reached their conclusion. And that sincerity, in turn, makes their assumption look hasty, shallow, and unconsidered. When people realize that insulting your intelligence will only result in their reasoning process being calmly and publicly examined, they quickly become far more cautious about making such careless attacks. We saw how questioning false assumptions can turn an insult into undeniable proof of your critical thinking. And once people realize that you apply logical analysis even to their behavior toward you, they begin to understand that any attack will be examined under the lens of reason. This response completely transforms the interaction. What once looked like an attack and defense dynamic becomes a test of logic and evidence. And in that intellectual territory, thoughtful people always hold the advantage. If you've ever responded to an insult by challenging the assumptions behind it, and then watched the attacker struggle because they had no evidence for their judgment, drop a comment with the number 3 below. You'll encourage others who are also learning to use critical thinking to handle attacks with confidence. Challenging assumptions proves intellectual rigor and critical thought. But our fourth response takes this one step further. It demonstrates your ability to analyze social dynamics from a higher perspective. Response number 4. I find it interesting when people lead with personal attacks instead of addressing the actual issue. This response works because it exposes their behavior pattern while showing your ability to analyze communication from an objective standpoint. Instead of engaging with the insult head-on, you rise above it, examining their style of communication. That instantly signals intellectual sophistication and emotional intelligence, making their attack appear primitive and small-minded by comparison. Jennifer once experienced the remarkable power of this approach during a tense team meeting about project timelines. She suggested a different strategy for client communication, but instead of debating the idea, a colleague went straight for the personal blow. "That's stupid. You clearly don't understand how this industry works. You're way too naive for these kinds of decisions." Many people would have defended their knowledge or reacted emotionally in that moment. Jennifer didn't. She simply responded with calm observation. I find it interesting when people lead with personal attacks instead of addressing the actual issue. Usually that means the topic has struck on something important that deserves discussion. The shift in the room was immediate. Everyone could see, crystal clear, who was being professional and who was being petty. Her colleague's face flushed red as he realized his behavior had been exposed in front of the entire team, not by a counterattack, but by a measured and mature analysis. Jennifer didn't stop there. She brought the focus back to productivity. I'm still interested in discussing the communication approach itself. What specific concerns do you have about the strategy I proposed? In one sentence, she redirected the group back to meaningful dialogue while also making it clear that she operated on a higher professional level. Marcus Aurelius often wrote, about observing human behavior objectively, rather than reacting emotionally to poor choices. This response embodies that same Stoic wisdom. You're not taking the insult personally. You're treating it as a phenomenon to study, much like a social scientist analyzing behavior in real time. The intellectual superiority of this approach is undeniable. It shows that you understand psychology and group dynamics deeply enough to identify and name destructive behavior patterns on the spot. That alone demonstrates authentic intelligence about human nature and effective communication. And here's why it's especially powerful in group settings. It doesn't just reframe the conversation for you, it educates everyone else who is watching. You're essentially providing live commentary on the interaction as it unfolds, positioning yourself as the more sophisticated, objective observer of human behavior. We saw how responding with calm observation can turn an insult into a living example of human behavior. By pointing out the communication pattern instead of reacting directly, you elevate yourself to a higher level of dialogue. This kind of meta-level analysis shows that you're not only paying attention to content, but also to the patterns of communication beneath it. While your attacker is trapped in the cycle of emotional reactions, you're operating from a strategic awareness, understanding how conversations unfold and how different approaches reveal both character and competence. Seneca wrote about the importance of maintaining virtue regardless of how others behave toward us. And this response is exactly that principle in action. Meeting rudeness with wisdom and insight rather than lowering yourself to match their negative energy. The psychological impact on your attacker is enormous. They expected you to defend yourself or strike back. Instead, you turned them into a case study in poor communication. They are no longer the aggressor. They've become the subject of your behavioral analysis. This response also carries an almost academic quality. You're showing intellectual distance from their emotional jab, treating their insult not as a personal attack, but as data about their communication style. That alone demonstrates remarkable maturity, both emotionally and intellectually. But the key lies in your delivery. Your tone must reflect genuine observation, not sarcasm, not condescension. You're not attacking them. You're simply noting an interesting pattern you've observed. This objectivity makes your intelligence and emotional control shine, while making their lack of both painfully obvious. And once people realize that insulting your intelligence will only result in their behavior being calmly analyzed like a classroom case study, they quickly learn to act with far more professionalism. If you want to master more intelligent responses to difficult people and build unshakable confidence in any social situation, Make sure to like this video and subscribe to Stoic Training for daily wisdom on communication skills and mental strength. Analyzing behavior highlights both intellectual sophistication and emotional maturity. But our final response demonstrates the ultimate level of confidence that shows itself through gracious acknowledgement. Response number 5. I appreciate you sharing your perspective. This response reflects supreme confidence by treating their insult as nothing more than another viewpoint worth acknowledging. It proves you are so secure in your intelligence that you can recognize their perspective without feeling threatened. In doing so, you demonstrate both emotional maturity and intellectual security in a way that completely disarms their attack. Maria discovered the power of this response during a family gathering. When she spoke about her business decisions, her brother immediately mocked her in front of the entire extended family. You're not smart enough to understand this family business stuff. You should just stay out of financial discussions and let the adults handle it. His goal was clear: to humiliate her publicly. The room tensed. Everyone waited to see if Maria would blow up in anger or retreat in embarrassment. But instead, she looked at him calmly and said, I appreciate you sharing your perspective. Then she smoothly continued the conversation, turning to her uncle and asking for his thoughts on the business matter they had been discussing. Her brother was left speechless. There was nothing for him to push against. No emotional outburst to exploit, no defensive stance to attack further. Maria's grace made his aggression look childish and out of place, and her effortless continuation of the conversation showed she wasn't intimidated or diminished in the slightest. We saw how Maria responded with calm acknowledgement and grace, turning an uncomfortable moment into proof of her wisdom and dignity, and the impact was immediate. The rest of the family instantly recognized who had handled the situation with maturity and who had chosen petty insults. Her brother's credibility collapsed in that moment, while Maria's reputation only grew stronger because of her composed response. Seneca taught that we must hold on to virtue regardless of how others behave toward us, because our true character is revealed not by what others do to us, but by how we choose to respond. This response captures that principle perfectly. It answers rudeness with grace, protects your dignity, and sends a powerful signal of confidence. Only someone truly secure in their intelligence can meet an insult with such calm balance. It shows you are not threatened, because you know your worth and your capabilities, no matter what others say. The effect is also disarming. The attack loses all its force because there is nothing for them to escalate against. They expected you to defend yourself, to argue, or to retreat, any of which would have validated their insult. Instead, your calm acknowledgement makes their aggression look exaggerated, unnecessary, even childish. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about responding to hostility with virtue, noting that this approach protects your peace of mind and, through contrast, often shames attackers into better behavior. Your grace shines a light on their lack of it. In professional environments, this type of response instantly makes you appear as the mature, confident leader, while exposing the other person as someone who falls back on personal attacks when they have no logical argument. Colleagues, managers, and anyone watching pick up on these dynamics and quietly draw conclusions about both competence and character. The psychological impact on your attacker is often transformative. When their insult is met with grace instead of emotion, they're forced to confront how inappropriate their behavior was. Many people even end up apologizing later, once they realize just how badly they came across compared to your maturity. The key to making this response work is sincerity. Your appreciation must sound genuine, never sarcastic. Your tone should communicate that you truly value hearing other perspectives, even if those perspectives are delivered poorly. This authenticity makes your maturity obvious, while highlighting their emotional immaturity in sharp contrast. And here's the lesson it teaches. Insulting your intelligence won't provoke the emotional reaction they're looking for. Instead, they'll be met with composure and grace, which makes them look petty by comparison. Over time, this discourages future attacks, because they see that their tactics simply don't work on you. When you consistently respond to intellectual attacks with this level of calm and confidence, you build a lasting reputation, someone who cannot be rattled or diminished by the poor behavior of others. These 5 responses together form a complete arsenal, helping you defend your intelligence, preserve your dignity, and expose the weakness hidden behind insults. The Stoics always reminded us that other people's opinions do not determine our worth or intelligence. What does reveal who we are is how we respond when challenged. Practice these responses until they become second nature. The confidence you'll gain, knowing you can face condescension with grace, will radiate through everything you do. If this video helped you build confidence in handling condescending people, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Stoic wisdom on communication and mental strength. And comment below, which response resonated most with you? Have you ever tried one of these in real life? Remember, true intelligence always includes the wisdom to respond with grace and dignity under pressure.